Welcome back to the channel, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you have a terrific day ahead of you. In today's video, I've got for you the old favorite from Everything You Need, which is the best captain, followed by a section on players that you could buy and players that you could sell. A lot of what could be put in this video has been left specifically for solving your problems, given the slightly unique nature of this week and the fact there's less things that will probably crop up. So if there's anything you want in that video, I was thinking about discussing the best free hit, the best wildcard, Arsenal assets, and so on. Just let me know and drop it in the comments. I hope you enjoy it, and without anything else seeming to be said, let's get into it. What better way to bring back the old favourite than to start with Mohammed Salah? In my analysis of Aston Villa versus Newcastle in transfer plans, there are a couple of things I spoke about regarding Aston Villa's attacking dynamics. One being Tielemans and the lack of burst from midfield, to go and combine with Watkins and to give him that option and to test Newcastle in that way. And secondly, the fact that you're not really going to get him taking the ball on the half turn, carrying it through, and then releasing it into Watkins when he's making a run or he's hit a channel against that very aggressive, physical, competent midfield. That's one thing to hold in your mind. The second is McGinn versus Livramento and the lack of change Aston Villa got out of their right side against Livramento in that duel. A lot of the time, like a lot, if not every time, McGinn's receiving sideways, he's receiving almost back to goal, and he's never really threatening the space in behind Livramento. And against someone who's so good in the duel, you need to be able to do that. You need to gain the positional advantage against him more so than anything else. And that's the one weakness I'd say that Tino Livramento really has, if he has one in particular, and that is positionally, you can still catch him outright. If I think of Cesar Azpilicueta, I know Livramento has been playing at left back in this game, in the game against Villa, and likely again, but he's naturally a right back. Really, really high positional IQ, really high footballing IQ in general. Doesn't have that same quality yet, right? So you can get him, but to be able to access that, you need to be able to hit the space in behind. So you give him something to think about, and so you can actually catch him there. Obviously, Salah's got that, and not only has he got that, he's got a variety of other tools. So those two places where Villa couldn't hurt Newcastle, I think Liverpool can. And just to go back, obviously you'll have Wirtz at 10. Well, maybe you'll have him at 10 unless he opts for a system change. And he's got a better ability to do what Tielemans couldn't in that sense. So that's one thing. Another thing is Joelinton, the highest of the three midfielders constantly operating on that left side. So in transition, when he's higher, you can envisage scenarios where Salah has more isolated situations and he gets to go at the fullback, he gets to create with more space in and around him. That could lead to returns. And then the other thing is, and this is similar to the Wirtz one, where it may not be super relevant for Salah in a direct sense, but it has some overall positive effect. And that is with Florian Wirtz pulling to that left side, and you've got Gakpo and Ekitike has a preference to do so as well. You could definitely see at times maybe overloads against Trippier, and I would say his 1v1 ability or his just defensive ability overall as he's aged isn't as good as someone like Livramento. So that's another place you could exploit them. Now, how that affects Salah's returns, or maybe cutbacks, crosses, Salah reviving, just like he did in pre-season. He actually scored a goal when the ball was cut across from the left-hand side. So in general, that's one way they could hurt them. Another thing I'd like to speak about is Newcastle not having Isak. All of a sudden, when you're boxed in, you can't just go long to Isak as an outlet. Now, you've really got to leverage, one, you're carrying from your wingers, and two, you're pacing behind. What I do think that will mean is they'll try to play through Liverpool a little bit more. And with Liverpool's quality of counter-pressing, it's quite risky. And at times, even if it's once or twice in the game, they get it wrong. And it just happens to be on Salah's side. They put him in. I think this is a good opportunity for Salah to get returns. Something else that's weighing in my mind is the performance from last season. It just keeps replaying in my mind whenever I think about captaincy, which has actually been given quite a bit of thought to prior to today, prior to yesterday as well. So yeah, that's certainly something that's playing on my mind. Then of course you've got the fact that they've just got so much quality overall. And against Newcastle's 4-5-1, I think of all the things that I'd want, maybe as opposed to something structural, I just want this quality, right? As opposed to like a specific dynamic being implemented, I just want a little bit more quality in general to break it. And between Ekitike, Gakpo, Wirtz, Salah, the right backs rivals, if Frimpong's fit, as Szoboszlai's later rivals as well, I think they've got enough. So that's another overall route to the points for Salah. In this video, you're not going to see a conclusion to the captaincy. I'd like a little bit more time to think about it. I just thought I'd present what I had found that was maybe not so obvious. And the other thing, which is obvious, is that he's just the best attacker in the league with penalties, with 90 minutes in this game. And if there's quite a few transitions in it, I'm not really sure that I want to bet against him. Category, downside, and matchup. 3 reasons, when all put together, why I think it's very challenging to justify an Erling Haaland captaincy this week. Firstly, he's a forward, so 1 less point for a goal, no clean sheet point accessible, rules always lower as such, and ceilings harder to attain. That's pretty basic. The second thing is, well, you can put the two together if you want. Salah and Palmer both have quite good upside, I'd say, with their matchups this week. Whereas Haaland's, I'm not sure it exists as much. And that just increases the risk even more for me. If you look at Spurs, you look at Brentford versus Manchester City maybe a year and a half ago, or more so, we used to frequently say, I'm not sure about captaining Haaland against Brentford, because when they employ a particular type of system, stylistically, it doesn't really suit Haaland. So let's look at that system, and let's look at what Erling Haaland really would want as an ideal set of conditions to score a hat-trick. 1, he'd want space in behind. 2, he'd want to ensure there is a game where he could be a huge threat in transition. And 3, he'd want to leverage his aerial threat. Well, against the back 3, which is what you expect Spurs to employ, with a particularly lower line height, you don't have that space in behind. You don't probably have the aerial threat with this back 3 as well, because Romero, Danso, and Van de Ven are all very good in the air. And thirdly, one thing Erling Haaland's very, very good at doing is using that physicality to get away from his man in the first place. I mean, he can have you at a standing start, he can be backing into you, and then he can just roll you, go into the space where the ball's been put into the channel, and just rip you to pieces. But with 3, if you are to go and pin someone and then try and roll them, you're only really going to run into another centre back if the one's covering well, right? That's one big advantage of having a back 3. And another thing is, if you expect Spurs to be really compact and not, even if they press high, but then to get back into a compact shape, which we've seen Newcastle do superbly well at times last season, and I imagine Frank will employ something of the same, it's going to be very hard to play through them. And I just can't imagine with this particular system, him being the biggest threat in transition in comparison to what he could be against another. Then you've also got the fact that when he's played against these systems, like we've expressed, he's found it more challenging. Look at his routes to goals in them. Well, he's probably going to be stationed higher, honestly, because you could see Spurs pinning him. But when he does so, he's going to almost have to manufacture something that you would associate more with Hugo Ekitike as opposed to Erling Haaland's strength, right? He might just be someone who carries a lot of presence in the box and as such demands the attention of the centre-back, both mentally and positionally. But again, it might just be the guys who can play in the pockets, who can pop up, like the Fodens, who really benefit against this type of system. And the other thing is the quality of the opposition. I mean, with all due respect to Brentford, who did a magnificent job at times against him, this is a better side. You expect Danso will come in, Van de Ven, Romero, Palini in front to protect. This is challenging. This is really challenging. And when you put all of those variables together, I'm not so sure that City blow them away. And even if they score a couple, I'm not so sure that it's necessarily him, the one that's getting the return in this game, if they employ that system. Before we conclude, a couple of things. One, the creatives in the side. Because if you are not to have the favourable conditions of being able to hit the space in behind, typical transitional threat you would associate with Erling Haaland, the box threat in the air, then you certainly want creatives like a De Bruyne to unlock you something with a superb bit of play. Doesn't really have that profile in midfield behind him. On the wing, yeah, he has a brilliant one in Oscar Bob for this, but Jed Spence is very capable of holding his own in 1v1 scenarios. So in terms of the creatives, and as a route to goals, I'm not so sure. The last thing I wanted to finish on, though, is the reason he's in this discussion as a top 3 contender is because he's obviously got upside associated with him, and he's obviously such a good player and such a good team that it could go really well. I just have more faith in Thomas Frank's system and players than I do maybe West Ham's ability to stop Palmer or Newcastle's ability to stop Salah. If there is to be a game where there is more space that he can exploit, then yeah, absolutely. And if the line height is a little bit higher than you saw at Brentford at times, or for most of the game, then yeah, again, he could certainly hurt them. It's just my interpretation of what Thomas Frank is going to do. If you looked at captain matrices before the season came out, there was very likely to be a gold medal next to Cole Palmer's name for this game week because by a mile, with all due respect, it's the best opposition, especially in comparison to Salah and Haaland. However, following our poor performance in Game Week 1 and the fact that he barely had anything, Salah scoring, Haaland bracing, that's certainly changed in most people's eyes. You've got Salah at 35% in my captaincy poll. You had Palmer at 25, Haaland at 25, and then other completing up the rest. But still, for another, that's quite high. Then you look at the potential choice, and there's so much uncertainty. And I say that because, irrespective of whether you choose Salah or Palmer, I've got Haaland lower, and you gain 100 points or you lose 100 points. I don't think it'll be some genius decision in most cases, unless you find a really good footballing edge, or you'll be an idiot if you get it wrong. I say that to emphasize just how close the decision is. I actually think you should use a bit of your instinct here. Let's go into the football analysis a bit, and then we can circle back. Well, what did Palace do really well, which meant that he couldn't really get involved in the game, and he, from an FPL perspective, looked quite poor. For one, they were so intense, they were compact, their dueling was great, and their players were very strong, high levels of physicality, and they've got the midfield to ensure that you can't just float in and around there and pick up the ball in the pockets and profit, right? For a variety of reasons. You look at West Ham, they don't have the centre-backs that Crystal Palace have. They're certainly not as physical, and with all due respect, not as good. They certainly don't have the midfield at West Ham, nor the physical profiles at the Palace, or the quality that they have. They don't have the transitional threat in their front line. So at times, maybe we're more open to overloading and leaving 1v1s on the back line, right, by sending an extra man forward. Okay, so that's that. But they do use the same system, and we did clearly struggle against it. João Pedro against three centre-backs didn't have the best times. He wasn't dropping deeper to combine, and that certainly didn't help. Enzo, there was no real positional rotations with Palmer to bring him into that right-hand side, and the lack of creativity from the eights, both Cucurella and Enzo, was certainly not helpful against a compact deep block. Gitten's 1v1 threat was not really there against Munoz, and now he's up against an even better 1v1 defender in Wan-Bissaka. And then Neto's not really the type to supply Palmer in that fashion either. So, easier, right? And there'll definitely be moments where the quality is on display, right? Whereas against like Adam Wharton, you weren't able to get half a yard. Maybe against whoever's playing in the West Ham pivot, you will. And that I can certainly imagine, and Cole Palmer uses that to his advantage, or Chelsea uses it to his advantage, and then Palmer profits at some point in the move, the assist or the goal. At the same time, if we're poor again against those dynamics, and those players just have a good day, particularly those two in midfield, and that's really the key for them, where their big weakness is. And all of a sudden, it's not looking so great again. That's why I said there's so many counteracting variables, because they're definitely a lot worse than Crystal Palace, and we should be able to put them away, especially with more time and more recovery since the Club World Cup. But we don't have the form leading into it. And you've only got one game week sample size, right? You've only seen us not play well, so it's not a guarantee, especially when he's not playing in his preferred position, that he comes good. And that's about it. That's all I really have to say. I thought I'd just present the counteracting variables. Right? And the other thing is he hasn't scored an open play goal since January. That's really bad. But he's also top quality, and he's also the best player on that pitch against a side that have just lost 3-0 to a promoted side. Albeit Sunderland actually look quite promising. At least their squad does. So again, so many counteracting variables. And that's why I don't want to go into too deep of analysis, because I don't think it exists for this game, right? I've only got one game week's worth of sample size to use. He could change up the system. He could do a million and one things. West Ham could just play a lot better than they did, and that would be completely understandable. It's not like they've had 10 bad games in a row. They had one bad game away at Sunderland. They're under the lights, at home, so on and so on, right? So what I would say is use a bit of your instinct. If you go here, you're primarily going for the fixture. If you go Salah, you're probably going a bit more for the form and the matchup as well. That could be that. And if you do get it wrong, no worries. It was a very close decision, at least in my eyes. If you would like to finally beat your friend in that mini league, if you would like to have a more enjoyable FPL experience and improve your overall rank, then consider signing up to my community. On site and on screen, you can see a bunch of testimonials from people who joined the community, had a great experience, and said that their play and performance in the end improved as a result. So, like I said, consider signing up to the community. On site, you can see all other testimonials, some which may resonate with you more. We've had new members join and they've really enjoyed it. And of course, you can see all benefits on offer. I would absolutely love to have you, and I very much hope to do so. Fitting that the most popular man in FPL right now, quite literally given the transfers in, is the only one to have his dedicated section in players to buy. I thought I'd provide complete clarity around my views surrounding Tijani Reijnders. Firstly, the football performance was nothing that I had an issue with. I thought it was very, very, very good. But we can put that to a side from one point, because that's not really what I care about. I care about the performance from an FPL lens. And that, whilst I thought it was good / very good, was a little bit overrated in my opinion. And I will explain why. There were a lot of positives on display, right? And they were obvious. For example, playing in this type of role is exactly how you want Pep to platform him, or at least close, right? You've got someone sitting at the base, so he doesn't have to play that role. You've got someone with a really high defensive IQ in Bernardo Silva, so at times he can still stay higher up, and he's not always having to fill in. Then, in possession, I mean, how many times did you see him advance into the final third? How many times did you see him just in close proximity to the goal and his teammates when they were attacking? That was all great. Then, you've got a brilliant, and I mean a brilliant finish on the left-hand side. That I was really impressed with. And obviously the assist, he shows a bit of what he did at Milan with the carry and then the release. That was all good. My only issue with this was, when I watched it, it didn't scream to me translatable against Brighton, Spurs, United and Arsenal in the next 4. Not 100%, not that it couldn't, it just didn't scream to me that it definitely did. And I thought the way that people were making out to be, that he was now almost borderline essential, was too much of a stretch after one game. I think it's very fair to want to see him at least perform against a different type of system, all of which will be harder for him, right? In terms of the defensive setups that he comes up against. He'll come up against better players, high levels of physicality, and he'll probably have more defensive responsibility in these games, probably as well, right? Also, we've seen Pep be quite versatile throughout the years, so you never know if he plays a slightly different role should he drop Bernardo Silva. I personally think that he's actually going to continue to be platformed very well. I can see Gonzalez staying at the base quite a bit, and then whoever he pairs him with, whether it be Gundogan or Silva, will ideally play a more defensive role for him, and then he'll be able to be a bit more advanced. If he pairs him with, like, I don't know, plays with Cherky, right, and then he has a right-sided winger as well, or right forward, then all of a sudden it becomes much harder. But I actually don't think that'll happen too much. That's all good. It's more so just the translatability against better opposition. I'll give you an example. When you have better 1v1 defenders against, let's say, Oscar Bob or Jeremy Doku, all of a sudden there's less need to double up, right? Because you trust your fullback can handle it, you can keep more men in the middle, and it won't look like he'll have as much space as he did against Wolves at times, because he won't. Secondly, the centre will probably be more congested, especially looking at Wolves' system. Maybe not against United, but the other three. The situations that he scored a goal in and the situation that he got his assist in aren't really too replicable against those sides, and so on and so on and so on, right? And more defensive responsibilities in these type of games in general, I assume. But all I was saying is, whilst it was very good, is that exact performance and role translatable into those bigger games? I'm not so sure yet. Let's see, and then we can go from there. At least in my opinion, I think it's a little bit early to jump the gun for a transfer. And it was 10 points. It wasn't like 15, whereby like he scored a stunning race and completely dominated the game. The amount of moments he actually had on the ball that were translatable, very likely, I don't think were too many. So again, I'm not trying to take anything away from the performance. I thought it was a good / very good performance. You can get great value for 5.5. I'm just saying the translatability wasn't completely there just from that performance alone. And we'll see what happens. And if he does it against Spurs or Brighton, if he does it against both, then fair enough. Chris Woods, Cunha Mbeumo, Semenyo, Evan Nilsson, all players you could consider buying this week. But before you do so, I would certainly suggest that you strongly consider the upside associated to just rolling and having 2 free transfers in Game Week 3. And all the possible routes that will open up to you, and all the extra information you would have gained. When you take the learnings from Game Week 2, and you add them to the learnings from Game Week 1, then you will have so much more information than you do now. So much more. That will be so helpful, because maybe Game Week 1 was a little bit of a fluke for one team. But if it happens twice, you know, they put in a really good performance twice, they mess up twice, then all of a sudden you can have a lot more confidence and certainty that this trend may continue. But if you don't care, if you want one of these 3 for whatever reason, and some in many cases will be very justifiable if you're watching this video, then let's discuss them. Forest look good. Wood looks really good. They have a good Game Week 3 fixture in West Ham, or appears to be a very good one at the moment. But the short-term upside's there. In terms of Palace in Game Week 2, those guys have a fixture Thursday night. Then they have Sunday at 2 o'clock, not even 4:30. So that's a quick turnaround, right? Especially early season. Probably not as good, you haven't got as many minutes in the legs as you would like for that type of schedule. But maybe they face a fatigued Palace side. To an extent, they certainly will. They've just lost Eze. Can't be great for the mood in the camp. There's talks about Guehi leaving. I mean, Chelsea still need a left centre-back. Liverpool might sign him. They're probably a little bit unsettled. They won't have the same threat. Who knows? Maybe that will result in them being pinned in a little bit more. He's just gun, isn't he, Chris Wood? I also really like the dynamics. I like Neko's advancements a little bit more. The fact that he's advancing a little bit more. I like Enjoy on the right side. And I spoke about how if they could get this type of profile, it would be better for Wood than having Elanga, irrespective of player quality. Only to an extent. You know what I mean? And they've done that. And he looked sharp. The third goal was really good against Brentford. Like, really, really good. And if you've got a striker in that type of form, he's 7-6 now. He'll be 7-7, I assume, if he scores against Palace. I don't mind it. If you want to back out of like a Bowen, who we're going to speak about in the next slide. But I don't think you need to sell João Pedro. I don't think you need to sell a Solanke or an Evanilson. Maybe a Mateta. Yeah. But none of the rest. United mids. Okay. Realistically, you're going to be looking at Cunha and Bremer, especially given what you saw in Game Week 1. My preference, if you're going to choose to go over here, would be Cunha. I think against Fulham and Burnley, in games where there's less space exploit in behind, and you just want someone who's going to be in front of the block to score, these type of games, I prefer Cunha. I think when you have more space in behind, you need Mbeumo as the runner, then it makes more sense to go there. So, for example, 4 and 5, Chelsea and City, it's not like Cunha can't do anything in those games. It's not like Mbeumo can't do anything in these games. It's quite close, as I think everyone will have it down. But me, personally, with the short-term upside and how they looked, I would take Matthias Cunha. Another thing is the chances that they're used to putting away. Again, I think they're more likely to happen for Cunha in 2 and 3, with Mbeumo more so the 4 and 5. But obviously, you're facing harder opposition, so it's never a positive, or very rarely. And lastly, Bournemouth. I like Bournemouth assets a lot. I said it before Game Week 1. They were usually like my picks outside of the ones I had, especially Evanilson. At 7 million, I think he presents absolutely magnificent value. So if you can go there justifiably, right? Like you're not selling Ollie Watkins, who I will advocate not to sell on the next slide. But if you really have a spot where it makes a lot of sense to sell Semenyo, for example, you want to get rid of Vert or Evanilson, this is one I can definitely get on board with because I've got them doing well. They've got good fixtures. Evanilson and Semenyo in particular, really good players. And I think they will get only better when Kluivert's back because I don't think Tavernier suits that 10 completely. To conclude, let's look at some players you might be considering selling. The first being João Pedro. The game against Palace is the toughest one I'd say he will have in the first 4, with the following being West Ham away, which is probably the best, Fulham at home, and then Brentford away. And given he's 7.5, if he does come good, he will represent such magnificent value that I'd say you almost have to give him one more. And like we spoke about in the last section, the ability to have 2 free transfers next week will be huge, or 3 the week after, right? So moving him out for, honestly, I don't know anyone as a forward who's got a better fixture who'd be affordable to yourself. If you can get to Watkins, okay, maybe, but still, at 7.5 down the line, João Pedro could represent absolutely amazing value. Got to give him the West Ham game at least, and then reassess. Probably Fulham and Brentford as well, given that he's more expensive than Palmer by a considerable amount. But to someone I would consider selling somewhat strongly at least. For me, the main thing is when you're paying 8.5, the ceiling limitation that I perceive that exists at the moment, just because I don't think he's quite there, as I spoke with a rhythm in transfer plans. I don't think he's quite adapted and felt the Premier League truly. With Newcastle away and Arsenal at home, I'm not sure this is the most efficient use of 8.5. And if you have really strong conviction in another asset, for example, like a Matthias Cunha, like we spoke about in the last slide, and Antoine Semenyo, or someone of the sort, then I think it's far easier to justify this particular move. I'm not saying you should necessarily do it, but I would certainly consider it more. And of all the sales that could be made, this might be my preference in terms of the realistic ones that are going to happen. Fulkrug, yeah, I would get him out. I only saw him as a Game Week 1 shout, and then from 2 to 7, especially from an offensive perspective from West Ham, the fixtures are significantly harder. I mean, Chelsea, Palace, Spurs, and so on. But you probably don't have money lying in the bank just to upgrade to someone like Solanke, who I think could come really good, especially now that Eze is joining. So what are you going to do with him? I'd probably just bench him. I'd rather play 4-4-2 than start him, especially with Callum Wilson coming, maybe take some expected minutes away from him quite soon. And I'd look at getting him out, but more so in Game Week 3 when you have another transfer available to yourself. So you can get money from elsewhere, or even Game Week 4 if you need to do a three-way move. Moving on to his West Ham teammate, Jarrod Bowen. Just the same, he's got those really tough fixtures, but he's also 2 million more expensive. And this particular system, with this 9, I'm not so sure suits him too much. If you look at Bowen's best route to goals, left foot, cut inside from the right, and unleash. But in this narrow role, the left-footed shots that you're going to have are probably going to be, or they are going to be quite central, and therefore more likely to be going into players and into congested areas. So not only are there more bodies in front of him, but it's actually going to be harder to manufacture a better opportunity or get the shot off in the first place with any degree of likelihood that it's going to go in. The other thing is you have a 9 currently as well, whose, I guess, zone of occupation or ability to occupy a large zone isn't that good. So he can't push Bowen wider, right? And they can't play at increased distances. If you were to try and visualize that, I think you'd get what I mean. And so that left-footed option, I'm not sure it's on as much, and he's not as good on his right foot. For 8 million with those fixtures in this team, I'd be certainly looking to sell. And even if you were to do it this week, I wouldn't mind it. Maybe just given the fact that you still can hurt us in transition, I wouldn't mind it for one more. But after that, if he fails, I think he has to go. And then Ollie Watkins is a solid no. Too good of a player. The fixture's there. That's about it, right? Like the upside there. It's a high ceiling to the fixture. It's a really poor reason, in my opinion, to go into Game Week 3 with only one free transfer. We've obviously spoken about the upside to that. So, of all of them in this list, alongside João Pedro, absolute no-go when it comes to the sell for myself. That is all she wrote for this video, ladies and gentlemen. I certainly hope you enjoyed. Slightly shorter than usual, but makes sense given what's on offer to ourselves at the moment. Like I said, consider joining my community if you wanted any of the benefits mentioned. I would love to have you. And in the meantime, have a terrific day. I shall see you very shortly for an interesting team selection given my side. And like I said, have a terrific day. Goodbye.